When you look back at the 19th century, it's this incredible contradiction, isn't it? It was an age that built huge empires on these grand ideals of faith and progress. But at the very same time, it was fueling its own growth with the absolute brutal reality of human bondage. It's a story of blinding light and just a profound shadow. And we're going to try and figure out how both could possibly exist at the exact same time.
And this quote right here from the famous explorer David Livingstone, it just nails the whole vibe of the era. This relentless, almost unstoppable drive to move forward. It was a time of just incredible optimism, and this feeling is really the perfect place to start if we want to understand one side of our story.
And Livingstone himself, well, he was basically the poster child for the era's highest ideals. So let's take a closer look at this vision of faith that drove him right into the heart of a continent.
So who was this guy, David Livingstone? He wasn't just one thing. He was a doctor, a man of God, a trailblazing explorer, and, this is absolutely crucial, a fierce opponent of slavery. For him, these weren't separate jobs. They were all tangled up together, part of one single mission.
You can almost see his whole life's journey laid out right here. It started with this deep calling to serve God, which led him to study both medicine and theology. Then in 1840, he's off to Africa. But here's the thing. His goal was always twofold. One, spread the Christian faith, and two, end the slave trade. His explorations were never about fame. They were about opening up the continent to what he called Christianity, commerce, and civilization. And in doing that, he became this incredibly powerful voice against the horrors he was seeing firsthand.
For Livingstone, this was all connected. You couldn't separate saving a person's soul from fighting for their freedom and dignity. He really believed his faith was a command to change society for the better, not just to focus on individuals. It was this whole big vision for a better world. Now, Livingstone wasn't just some lone voice shouting into the wind. No way. The ideals that drove him were actually being echoed from the very top, from the heart of the British Empire, under its most famous ruler, Queen Victoria. And Victoria's reign, wow, it was astonishingly long. We're talking more than 63 years. Just think about that. She takes the throne as a teenager and goes on to become the empress of a global empire so vast that, as they famously said, the sun never set on it. And what an age it was. The Victorian era was just an explosion of change. You've got the Industrial Revolution kicking into high gear, with factories and railways popping up everywhere. The world was literally getting smaller. You see democracy and voting rights expanding back home, and at the same time, the British Empire is stretching across the globe. And underpinning all of it was this strong sense of moral purpose, really rooted in a Christian worldview.
There's this story, and whether it literally happened or not, it doesn't matter. It perfectly captures the official narrative of the empire. The idea was that England's greatness, its technology, its power, all of it, was built on a foundation of righteousness and faith. This was the kingdom of light, as they saw themselves.
Okay, so that's one side of the coin, the light. Now I want you to hold that picture in your mind, because at the very same time, in a different part of the world, a completely different story is playing out. The year is 1828, and the place is New Orleans. And here, we're leaving the world of queens and noble explorers behind. We're about to enter a kingdom of unimaginable darkness on a ship with the deeply ironic name, the United States. The story starts with a number. 200. And let's be crystal clear here. We're not talking about cargo, not property. We're talking about 200 human beings shackled to the floor of a ship. And here's another number. 50 pounds. That was the weight of the iron chains on each person. A constant, crushing weight reminding them of their reality. The journey from Alexandria, Virginia took 19 days. 19 brutal days. It started with 200 souls. 6 of them didn't survive. Only 194 made it to the docks in New Orleans. The conditions? I mean, they're hard to even comprehend. Temperatures were soaring over 100 degrees down in the hull. Filthy salt water mixed with blood, sweat, and human waste was washing over them. The air was thick with the stench of sickness, and they were given just enough food to barely keep them alive. And when the survivors finally got off that ship, their nightmare wasn't over. They were, and these are the words from the source material, paraded along the street like cattle. It's just the ultimate act of dehumanization. So where were they being marched?
to this ornate building with a sign that read New Orleans Exchange. This was no back alley deal. This was a massive, organized market, the largest in the world, and it was dedicated entirely to the buying and selling of human beings.
So, how on earth do we reconcile these two realities? A world of faith-driven, optimistic progress, and a world of cold, calculated, institutionalized evil happening side by side. This, right here, is the central paradox of the 19th century.
On one hand, you have this kingdom of light, with all its talk of faith, progress, civilization, and making the world better. On the other, the kingdom of darkness, defined by shackles, injustice, and human beings treated like livestock. These aren't two different planets. This is the same era. So how is that possible? When you boil it all down, it comes to this. One set of powerful ideals was being used to build and justify a global empire. And at the exact same moment in history, the immense profits made from human bondage were providing the economic engine to build a nation. Both things were happening at once, and both were shaping the world that we live in today.
And that just leaves us with this final, massive, uncomfortable question. It's a question not just about history, but about who we are. How can an age that talks so much about its own light, that believes so deeply in its own progress, cast a shadow so profound and so dark that we are still grappling with its consequences today?